Alrighty, today's video, men with narcissistic mothers. And this is a topic that I know very well, because if you don't already know, I have a raging narcissistic mother, and I've been dealing with her my entire life. And it wasn't until the last couple years that I realized she's a narcissist, and I began implementing my survival strategy to deal with her. But so what I want to talk about is what's happening with men in society, because men are in crisis. You know, we can see that all throughout Western society. And if you just look at the actual state men are in, you know, look at their physical appearance, it's very severe. Look at, you know, think about their minds, what they're talking about, what they're taking into their mind. It's really severe. And also, you know, men's spirituality, their spirit or their soul, you know, it's weakened, and, you know, men are really lost in this kind of modern Western society. And speaking from my experience of having a narcissistic mother and the impact that had on me being a man, you know, in 2026 and attempting to navigate life in the world, you know, it's disastrous for men to have narcissistic mothers. And so what I've seen is kind of three directions that, well, I guess you could say four directions that men can take when they have a narcissistic mother. So speaking from my experience, growing up with a narcissistic mother, that's the first woman, female, that you're going to relate to and form a bond with. And if that relationship is weird in any way, it's going to completely askew the way you perceive and relate to women. And the big thing with the narcissist moms with their sons is you can either be a golden child or a scapegoat. So I can speak from my experience of being a scapegoat. You know, my brother was the golden child. I don't know what's going on in his mind, but he's definitely pretty bizarre, and he has had very strange experiences with women. So I can only surmise what he's dealing with. But from my own perspective, you know, the big thing with being the scapegoat is you're constantly questioning how your mother feels about you. And the narcissist's standard strategy to really drain you is the love bombing, where they really turn it on strong, they really love you and are affectionate, and then they pull it away, and then they hate you. It's like this love-hate, and it's this roller coaster. And what ends up happening over time is that you then attach affection and love and bonding to other women in that way. You feel as though in order to bond and to have love and affection from women, that's how they need to treat you. To you, that gets programmed into you. So then, you know, that has a disastrous effect on how you're going to relate to women. And then that leads to being insecure. So I was always thinking to myself when I tried to get a girlfriend is I have to, number one, change myself and then try to adopt and mimic something that she's into. And then that's how she'll like me, and then that's how, you know, she'll want me to be her boyfriend. And then acting from that place of insecurity, and then that kind of emotional trauma bonding is then she has to like kind of play games. I mean, you know what I mean with when you're trying to court a woman or you try to meet her, it's this kind of game you have to play a lot of the time. It's just back and forth, and obviously it's not healthy and it's not right, but it happens a lot. And so I thought that was just natural. And so the path I took was that of the kind of like passive male, where you're kind of just the yes man. You know, you avoid conflict. You just kind of agree and go along with things. You're not really assertive. and you kind of just become the whipping post to these kind of terrible people that you end up, seeking out in a way, because you're seeking out the emotional trauma experience with your mother. You're finding that in other women, and then it's just this vicious cycle that continues. And that has been my experience. And so I observe within men that there's a lot of men taking that route. It's kind of the feminine, passive, yes man, non-confrontational, just kind of like you don't want anything that's going to be negative, or you don't want to rock the boat. And obviously that's what is happening is people just use you. So that's what happened to me. I was just used constantly. So the other avenue I see men take is that of they get really angry at women. And I've seen friends of mine who have narcissistic mothers, and you really see this in that kind of like the like toxic manosphere space, because you can really see what those guys are struggling with. And so what ends up happening is, you have a narcissistic mother, and she screws up your whole point of view of yourself and women. So what ends up happening is, instead of being passive, you turn aggressive, and then these men just begin hating women. And what ends up happening is, see, the big problem in society and the way society is teaching men to get out that anger and that aggression is it's the objectification of women and sexuality. So, intimacy and sexuality between men and women, that bonds them together, and that bond ultimately creates strength for both of them that they can draw from. And that's what my wife and I have, is we have this intimate bond that strengthens us beyond just our own energy. Like it, more energy is created from it. It's exponential. So what ends up happening is these men end up hating women, and they take all their aggression out on women, and then society is telling them that women are just vessels or objects, and any act of intimacy turns into an act of aggression. And so you see the behavior with these guys, and it's womanizing. They just want to sleep with as many women as possible, treat women like shit, and then ultimately like kind of brutalize the act of intimacy. And unfortunately, what ends up happening then is women who grow up with an skewed perception of men then are drawn to those kinds of men. And that's like so dominant within society and relationships between men and women, especially like with the millennials, the Xers, and I don't know how it's playing out for the younger folks, but I know for myself, because you look at on these YouTube channels of these male influencers, and their whole thing is just like hating women and just seeing these women as objects. And then in turn, the women think that that's how they need to present themselves to men, as physical objects. So then you're seeing women modifying their bodies in the pursuit of this objectified form of sexuality. They're like doing all the chemical treatments to their face and plastic surgery and augmenting their breasts and their butt and the whole thing. And that's huge. A ton of women are doing that. And that is sad, because men and women connecting through an intimate bond can be so supportive for one another. Because, speaking as a man, if all your life women have only fucked you over and there's been zero support, they only use you, when you meet a woman that is in in your corner. You guys are on the same team. You're working together. It completely changes the game. Like, it's game over. Like, you two now are building together, working together, and you're exponentially strengthening one another. And so that is what is possible. So, so we have the passive kind of yes man guy who just gets walked on. We have the aggressive man that objectifies women and objectifies intimacy. So then we have the third kind, which is literally the dude that just gives up. Like, there's a ton of these guys out there. And, they're to the point where women, they're trying to relate to women, and it's so draining and it's so demoralizing that they literally just throw in the towel and they're done. And then they retract back into their lives and themselves and this protected sanctuary world that they build. And what ultimately ends up happening is those people are they're coddled by society with these fake worlds that are created. The internet is just a huge escape for people, and you can just withdraw from the outside world and interactions with other people, and you can just go inward and just you can just live in your home and exist online or in these fake worlds. And I think people, they're just using that as a form of escapism and just pacifying the loss of the inherent need and want and desire to connect with another human, because everybody wants that. And the unfortunate thing is, a lot of these men are good guys and they have huge potential, and we don't even know the depth of their potential. They could really have an impact on society. They could raise wonderful children that could change the world. And now these guys are lost, and they're just, and the clock is just ticking. And I have many friends that fit that specific personality type that have just given up. And unfortunately, you can offer advice and show them that there is a better way, but it's their decision. Ultimately, it's their life, and they have to make the decision if they want to turn it around. So then that leads me to the kind of fourth way for men is, and this is if you have a narcissistic mother, is what's happened to me recently over the last few years. So I had, solid 35 years of the narcissistic mother raging on me. And then out of just pure, it was like a really terrible situation when I was drinking a ton, super depressed. I had some toxic girlfriend. The whole scene was terrible. The narcissist was on me like every day. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, his mom had like blown up their family and cheated on the dad. And he was telling me, I just said fuck you, and I cut her off. She's 100% out. I don't even talk to her. And that concept to me, I didn't know you could just like cut these people out of your life completely, 100%. He's like, I don't even talk to her. He's like, my life is great. And I was thinking to myself about it, and I really wanted to get out of the depression and the alcoholism and just the anxiety and just the terrible place I was in. And my mom and really my family wasn't offering the support that I needed. And so listening to my friend, I was like, dude, I'm done with her. Cut her off and cut off my dad as well, because he's toxic. And I still had a little communication with my brother, but pretty much cut them off for a whole year. This is before I knew about narcissism and narcissistic abuse. And in that year, my life changed 100%, 180 degrees, man. I was headed down to an early, like life was going to be done for me. And I turned that boat around and started sailing a completely different direction. I quit smoking weed. I stopped drinking. I started a business for myself. I met my now wife in a bar, not drinking. I would just go out to just have some kind of socialization. I'd broken up with my girlfriend. I was living in this piece of shit cab over camper from like the 70s in my brother's driveway, and it's wintertime. I'm out in this cab over, freezing my ass off, and it was like, but man, I was just like so focused on changing, and I knew you could do it. I knew I could do it, so I kept pushing, and like I'm getting all these little breadcrumbs along the way, and then from that year, I'm a completely different person. I'm still the same person, but so much has changed. A different person was inside of me, and I was able to like meet this new part of me. And that path is possible for men with narcissistic mothers, and it just takes the work, and the big thing is really learning about it. I mean, I'll talk more about that, but I more just want to focus on the men with the narcissistic mothers. And so then what ends up happening is now men that can get out of that narcissistic abuse cycle from the mother and from other women, now they're bettering their own life, and now they're bettering the lives of everyone around them. And then you meet a good woman and you guys start a family, and it's like next level, man. Now I've got these 2 kids. I have and they're girls, which is ironic, because women have been like such a torture in my life, that the irony now is I have 2 girls, and I'm raising these girls from this perspective of overcoming this intense narcissistic abuse from a woman. And like I'm really, imparting, like a positive male influence in their life, and then also my wife is imparting a positive female influence in their life. And like the girls are awesome, man. I mean, they're young now. My oldest is 6, and the youngest is 1.5. But the 6-year-old, she's already, really cool and like emotionally aware, and she's really like feminine. She likes girl stuff, but then she also likes to, like we have a wood shop, I have a blacksmith shop, and I run heavy equipment for a living, so I got her running the equipment. And she hammers away on metal, and we work in the wood shop. And, she's into tools and stuff, so it's really cool, because now, from all this, a man turning his life around and now imparting this positivity, into the children, that ripples throughout society and the world. And you don't know what those girls can do for the world and for other people. And so, it is possible to overcome that trap of having a narcissistic mother and then only relating to women based upon what you experienced because of that, demonic woman that was in your life. So it is possible. There's light at the end of the tunnel, and that's the big goal of my channel, and like this work, and why I'm sharing all this is to show you that you can do it. It's been done. I literally did it. But then also, like, let's move on from all of this, because I got a comment about how the person was saying, like, it's good to talk about all this narcissism and this narcissistic abuse, but what ends up happening is that we get lost in this like echo chamber of narcissism, and we're kind of missing the point where let's acknowledge it and talk about it and process it, and let's move on, man. Like we have a higher calling beyond just solely focusing on the wrongs that we've experienced. And as men in 2026, moving in to this kind of technocracy society that's being imposed on us, I mean, men have a vital role in maintaining, the old ways of how men were and are and can be, and then also in understanding that this new era we're coming into. Because in 20 years, when my kids are in their 20s, life is going to be very different. This whole thing is going fast. Like, when the baby boomers are dead, it's only the millennials that are the very last generation to understand what, an analog phone is. We're the only generation that's going to remember. Well, it's the Xers and the millennials, but the millennials are the biggest. It's so important for us to impart the old ways, because the baby boomers, from their parents, they were imparted the old ways of like the pioneer spirit and the industrialists and that time that their parents had, the 30s and the 40s, and this whole big Western American push that just was like this huge cultural movement. And anyway, you get the point. If we can start getting the men in a better spot, then I think we'll be in a good place. The next generation will be in a good place. So anyway, I mean, obviously the topic of men, I could go on for a long time. So, but I appreciate you watching. I hope this sparks, some thinking and debate. And anyway, thanks for watching. I got to pick up a piece of equipment on a farm, so you have a good day.